Alabama fans, we are just a few more days away until the Georgia Bulldogs come to Tuscaloosa. The line just keeps going down on this one. Started off at about 3.5. It was down to 2.5 yesterday, down to 2 now. So anybody getting their bets in, it's getting a whole lot closer now as we get closer to this game. On today's show, we're going to break down 3 of my top 3 matchups against Georgia that Alabama is going to have to win if they want to come away with a win in this game. Before we get into those, though, I want to make sure you guys turn your notifications on for me. We will be getting an official injury report this afternoon sometime. Not really exactly sure when that's going to come out. It's supposed to be by 8 p.m. Eastern time, so it could happen anytime, so make sure you guys turn those notifications on. We'll most likely have a short sometime this afternoon or tonight for you guys. Matchup number 1 that we need to watch for, it's going to be these wide receivers versus the defensive backs on both sides of the ball. Georgia's got some, real dogs in the defensive backfield for them. And, they've been really good so far this season. I think Alabama has got some solid talent back there as well. Got Zabian Brown starting, a true freshman. Kind of been going through some, growing pains so far. Domani Jackson, though, I think has played really well for you so far this season. He's got 3 penalties, but it really hasn't affected Alabama too much on those 3 holding penalties. And he's only got 1 reception allowed on 7 targets this season. So, my confidence level in Domani Jackson has really been growing and growing as the first couple games have gone by. But, it's another challenge going against, no pun intended, some dogs in what Georgia has at that wide receiver position. Zabian Brown, though, on the other hand, he has gotten beat multiple times so far this season. Now, he's only allowed 2 receptions as well on 7 targets. But, in a game like this against Georgia and Carson Beck, who, is one of the top quarterbacks going into the 2025 draft, coming up this season. Now, Carson Beck does, he got a little bit dinged up against Kentucky a couple weeks ago. We'll see if that lingers at all into this week. Don't really think it's going to have that much effect on him. It was his non-throwing shoulder, kind of landed on it funny. So I would expect Carson Beck to, be able to make those throws. Zabian Brown's really going to have to, lock in this game. Some of the leading wide receivers for Georgia really want to, focus in on Dominique Lovett. This kid is, really, really good. And I think Georgia so far this year really hasn't capitalized too much on, their wide receivers. They just really hadn't been able to push the ball downfield really consistently and effectively. Now, London Humphreys, another wide receiver for Georgia, is trending in a direction that he's going to be out for this game with mono. So we'll see what it looks like when that official availability report, I think is technically what they're calling it. When that comes out this afternoon, we'll get a better look at that. But like I said, Dominic Lovett is, really their deep ball guy for Georgia this year. He's got 2 receptions, 4 targets so far, over 20 yards. And he's the only person in this Georgia wide receiver room who has been targeted, that is air yards anyways, 20-plus yards downfield. He's got a couple of those. He got 4 targets there so far. So Alabama is going to have to make sure they can keep him in check. Like I said, he's only got 2 receptions for over 20 yards this year. So Georgia not necessarily going with the deep ball this year, but, Carson Beck is a really smart quarterback. He has not turned the ball over so far this season. He makes really smart decisions, and we'll talk about how Alabama can affect him later on in today's show. But, Alabama is really going to have to lock up these wide receivers for Georgia in this game. And, they got some young guys there and some inexperience at that cornerback position. So I am a little bit nervous. I don't think they've really been tested yet like they're going to be tested this weekend. So let me know at the pinned comment of today's video, what is your confidence level in Alabama's defense or defensive backs versus Georgia's wide receivers? Let me know. 1 on the low end, 10 on the high end. That ad comes here on YouTube. That's totally fine. You can ignore it. Go down there to the pinned comment and grade your confidence level in Alabama's DVs versus Georgia's wide receivers. Now on the flip side, Alabama's wide receivers. Former Georgia quarterback Aon Murray does a podcast now, and he's been talking about Alabama's wide receivers. This is the most recent comment that he said. He said, "I still think this wide receiving core is just good. I don't think they're great, but I think they are good." And if I'm being completely honest with you guys, I kind of agree with that. Now, to a little bit of an extent, Alabama really hasn't showed all it really, if any, their playbook so far this year. They really haven't had to, go crazy calling a bunch of plays. Ryan Williams, we've seen the flashes from him. He's been phenomenal so far for you this season. That touchdown pass to Jeremy Bernard against Wisconsin was just beautiful. I love that route that he ran. And Jalen Milroe, he didn't really have to throw him open, but it's the anticipation from Jalen Milroe. Jeremy Bernard wasn't even into his break yet going to the outside before that ball was out of Jalen Milroe's hands. So, this wide receiver core is still coming together for Alabama. And I think, against Georgia this week, I think, they're really going to have to create more separation than they have so far in this season. Because, look, Georgia's DBs, they got some dogs. Georgia's, is not great, I guess you could say, as their offense has looked. Their defense is still Georgia's defense. But if there is one guy that I do think Alabama can pick on maybe a little bit in this game, we've talked about him before this past week. I think it's going to be Dalen Everett. He's got the lowest Pro Football Focus coverage grade. And just looking back to what, happened against Kentucky, kind of got picked on a little bit in that game. So I think Alabama is really going to have to pick on him if they're going to pick on anybody in this secondary. Matchup to watch number 2. It's really going to be a battle of the trenches in this game. You got big guys versus big guys. Two of the best, recruiting programs in the country. They're going to get the best players in the trenches, and they're going up in practice against the best players in the country as well. So, whatever Georgia has on the other side of the ball, they're not going to be fazed by it. Same with Georgia to Alabama. They're not going to be fazed by what Alabama's bringing to the table. It's going to be a real battle. I think Tim Keenan, Tim Smith, both of those guys have been really, really good for you this year. Jamarian Latham, LT Overton have been really wreaking havoc for Alabama at the bandit position this year. And where Alabama is really going to have to attack Georgia's offensive line, I think it's going to be at those tackle positions. Ernest Green and Xavier Truss haven't really been that good for the Bulldogs this season. Tate Ratledge is going to be out, but I do think Mike Morris is going to be filling in for him at right guard. Look, Georgia's interior of their offensive line is still pretty solid, so if they can make some of those guys on the interior work, and then you got the guys like Quay Russaw and LT Overton, kind of on those outside, whether it's the Wolf, you even possibly might even have Jahad Campbell. He's lined up kind of as a pass rusher so far this year too. I think they can really take advantage of these tackles for Georgia. They just have not been that good this season. Now, they're coming off a bye week, off of a really tough week against Kentucky, too. So, a pissed-off Kirby Smart is a pretty scary thing, to be honest with you. He, really got into him, I'm sure, in the off week, watching that film. And, they're going to make some adjustments. I do not expect them to, be terrible against Alabama. I expect them to make some adjustments and be better on Georgia's offensive line. All right, guys, I want to give a shout out to our friends over at Factor Meals because they are a sponsor of today's show. And look, man, with football season, it's in full swing right now, and we're working late a lot here at the Chat Sports offices. So that means I just don't really have a lot of time to cook. That's why I use Factor's no prep, no mess meals. Meet your wellness goals thanks to a menu of chef-crafted meals with options like Calorie Smart, Protein Plus, and Keto. Factor's fresh, never frozen meals are dietitian approved and ready to eat in just 2 minutes. So no matter how busy you are, you will always have time to enjoy nutritious, great tasting meals. Make today the day you kickstart a new healthy routine. What are you guys waiting for? With 35 different meal options and more than 60 add-ons to choose from every single week, you will always have a new flavor to explore. Crush your wellness goals this month with dietitian approved meals and ingredients you guys can trust. Head to factormeals.com/BamaChat50 and use promo code BamaChat50 to get 50% off your first month's box plus 20% off your next month as well. That's code BamaChat50 at factormeals.com/BamaChat50 to get 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next month while your subscription is active. That link will be in the comments section and the description of today's video. One more time, guys, that's promo code BamaChat50 at factormeals.com/BamaChat50 to get 50% off your first box and 20% off your next month while your subscription is active. Going to the flip side now in the trenches, Alabama's offensive line. I have a lot of growing confidence in what these tackles for Alabama have been able to accomplish, at least in that week against Wisconsin a couple of weeks ago. Elijah Pritchett, there's been a lot of ups and downs with his career so far. He's had some off-the-field issues. He didn't really look very good last year at that left tackle position. Caden Proctor beat him out at the left tackle position, moves over to the right tackle spot this season, has to, win that job against Wilkin Formby. And look, he played phenomenal in that game against Wisconsin. And he looked very good at the end of that game against South Florida. But this game right here against Georgia, against a team who has dogs on the other side of the field, look, this is going to be a game for Elijah Pritchett that is really going to make a name for him. Same with Caden Proctor. I thought last year, we started off really, really slow and was battling some injuries as well. I do think a little bit of weight loss that Caden Proctor went through during the offseason really helped him out a lot. He's not, or he didn't last week, because, that's the first week that he played. He wasn't really getting over the balls of his feet and letting the defender get into him. He was keeping those arms out. And, at the end of the day, he was very, very good for Alabama last week. So if Alabama's offensive line can continue that progression from what they had just a couple of weeks ago, these guys right here against Georgia, it's going to be a really tough matchup because what we've seen from Georgia on their defensive line probably isn't really what they're going to have out there for this game against Alabama. They are getting some dudes back. Warren Brinson's been out a couple weeks with a lower leg injury. Jordan Hall, Mykel Williams, all have, really been banged up this season for Alabama. And Mykel Williams is a dog. So, he's going to be rushing the passer at that edge rusher spot. They like him both on the left and right side. They put him in different spots. So whether that's going up against Caden Proctor, whether he's going up against Elijah Pritchett, they are going to have to win those battles more times than not if Alabama wants to stand a chance, because at the end of the day, they got to help out Jalen Milroe too. So I want to hear from you guys in the comments section. Who do you think wins in the trenches? Who has the better players in the trenches and will win this battle? Type A if you think Alabama's going to win that battle, or type G if you think it will be the Georgia Bulldogs. Matchup number 3, and I think this is the biggest, most notable one of them all, right? It's Kalen DeBoer versus Kirby Smart. Kirby Smart had a rough time against Alabama and Nick Saban while Nick Saban was the head coach. Kirby Smart only 1-5 against Nick Saban and Alabama. That only win coming in the national championship game. So, if you're going to have one win against Nick Saban, I guess that is the one that needs to happen. But look, Kalen DeBoer has shown in his time as a head coach at the, not FCS level, at like more of the Power 5 level, he's a guy that can win the big games, man. He has been very good at, winning games against ranked teams versus top 25 teams. Kalen DeBoer has been 12-2. You can't really ask for much more. Against top 10 teams, he's 4-1. The only loss coming last year in the national championship game to Michigan in that game. And also against some of these premier coaches, Steve Sarkisian, Dan Lanning, he is 5-0 against those guys. So going up against other premier coaches, Kalen DeBoer has been able to, get the best of them. But they're a little bit different, style of head coaches than Kirby Smart. Both of those guys are, more, I think, offensive surrounded. Dan Lanning, very good on the defensive side of the ball as well. But Georgia's a different animal. Kirby Smart is a different animal when it comes to the defenses that he's been able to put out on the field. And I think one thing that Georgia really wants to do in this game is pressure Jaylen Milroe. I think that's going to be their main key to the game because, like I said, man, Georgia's defense is still Georgia's defense. just because they've started off a little bit slow this season does not change the fact that they still got some dogs over there on that side of the field. And look, Jalen Milroe under pressure. These are last year's PFF stats. Last year under pressure was the worst, looking Jalen Milroe that there was. Now, Jalen Milroe did not throw whatever that math adds up to be, 12 interceptions last year. He didn't throw 12 interceptions, but, some of the things overlap a little bit. When you're blitzed, you're probably also under pressure. And when the pocket's kept clean, you're also probably not being blitzed. So some of the math doesn't really add up there, but that is why. And look, when Jalen Milroe's under pressure, he is just not the best. And Alabama's really going to have to help him in that in that way. I think in this past week, I think they've really been, probably going over different situations when it comes to blitzes. Because we look back to that game against South Florida. They came with a lot of different exotic blitzes in that game. And you best believe Kirby Smart's going to be dialing stuff up to try to confuse Jalen Milroe, try to confuse this offensive line. And I think the biggest question for Alabama for this game is, can Alabama minimize the pressure on Jalen Milroe? And I think if they can do that, Alabama has a really, really good chance to win this ball game. So let me know in the comments section, what head coach do you think is better? Do you think it's Kalen DeBoer? Type D in the comments, or type S if you think it's Kirby Smart. Kirby Smart definitely has the resume. He's got a couple national championships. Kalen DeBoer's got there with a Washington team that, look, they're not in the same category as Alabama or Georgia. So, he is definitely the up-and-coming head coach to be scared of. So let me know who you think the better head coach is right now. And make sure you guys are subscribed right here to the Alabama Football Report. We will be doing our Alabama versus Georgia watch party. We'll go live an hour before kickoff, and do not miss out because we will be giving away our Jalen Milroe jersey. We're going to be raffling that off, so make sure you guys are subscribed right here. That's youtube.com/@RollTideTV.